Let's bring in Richard Haass now. He's President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and Senior Counselor at Centerview Partners. Richard, thank you so much. How are you thinking about this?
Look, there's a lot of tough issues out there in the foreign policy inbox, what to do about Ukraine, China. It could go around the world. This ought not to be one of them. The United States could quite simply negotiate an arrangement with Greenland, with Denmark, that would give us the additional security and economic access we're interested in. That's not the issue. There's a case for a closer relationship. What there's not a case for whatsoever is how we're going about this. This mixture of coercion, threat, tariffs is truly, truly, truly counterproductive. It might not help us here, but more important, it's going to break the foundation stones of America's most important relationships that have served us well economically and strategically now for 8 decades. So this has got to be on anybody's short list of really bad ideas.
You know, the only thing I haven't heard much about is, and the president put this in a post at some point in the past couple of weeks. He said, we need Greenland for the Golden Dome. You know, I hear a lot about the sea routes and the shrinking ice caps and, you know, whatever China and Russia's designs may be on these waterways. What is the Golden Dome?
Again, the idea that we need Greenland for various types of missile defense or other forms of defense, that's not the issue. Let's just posit there's a good strategic and economic case for a more intimate relationship between the United States and Greenland. That's not the issue. The issue is, why are we going about it in a threatening, coercive way? The entire secret sauce of American foreign policy for the last 8 decades has been that we get countries to work with us, not because they have to, but because they want to, out of consent. That was the fundamental difference between us and the Soviet Union. They had satellites. We had partners and allies. So what's wrong here is not the goals. What's wrong here is the means. It's about that simple.
So as I understand it, Nuke, I think that's how you pronounce it, is a 4.5-hour flight from New York. Our Leslie Josephs told me United has a nonstop flight. 4.5 hours from New York is strategically significant. Is it possible that the president feels as though the Europeans or Denmark or whoever is not treating the issue with the seriousness that he thinks it deserves from the American side?
Well, then treat it with greater seriousness with them. Look, we defended Europe for the entire Cold War without owning Europe. We've kept China away from Taiwan without owning Taiwan. So the idea that you have to own something to have it be part of your strategic or defense perimeter is simply nonsense. So that's not the issue. And again, if Greenland's more important than it was, in part because of climate change, ironically enough, an issue the administration denies, but it has opened up the waterways. Russia and China are either actual or potential adversaries. Then yes, let's work with the Europeans, let's work with Greenland in terms of beefing up our response. My guess is they'd be open to it if it were done the right way. You know, at the risk of repeating myself, this is not about ends. This is about means. And the means seem designed to not only not get what we want with Greenland, but to break the U.S.-European relationship, which, as you're seeing today in the markets and beyond, would be one of the most, probably the most costly step we could do against ourselves.
One more on the substance of the issue and then to the points you're making, which is it possible that the Europeans are not treating the severity of the issue the way that, in other words, you know, there seems to be this arguing back and forth about, well, were there Chinese ships or Russian ships? And if so, were they technically in the waterways? Or they technically, you know, and is a waterway defined by a 3-mile wide strip? Or can you just shed some clarity for those of us, again, you know, what are the events as it relates to the threat surrounding Greenland? I mean, have we seen an uptick in that kind of act? I know there's been certain reports of drones flying through. I thought it was Danish airspace, things like that, Russian drones in the European airspace. I don't know if there was any truth to that. I mean, what have we seen in terms of these incursions, and why does it seem like the U.S. Is highly concerned, but perhaps Europe is highly concerned? I don't know. What can you tell us about that?
Look, what's changed is the waterways have opened. You have greater Chinese and Russian activity in the larger Arctic area. So I think those are the big changes, and probably a greater emphasis on things like rare earth minerals. It's changed our focus. For all these reasons, places like Greenland have gone up in their economic and strategic importance. There's no, though, immediate Russian or Chinese threat to those areas, a potential one, of course. So the question would be, we're not in a crisis other than the one we're generating. So let's work with the Europeans, let's work with Greenland and Denmark and say, okay, what's a smart strategy for building capability, building resilience, deterring any Chinese or Russian threat from emerging, or if it does emerge, potentially defending against it. That's a serious defense conversation. We do that 5 days a week, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. There's nothing, if you will, special. What's different here is that the threat has, or rather the situation is evolving, again, more than anything because of the changing climate, which has made the Arctic and land areas near it somewhat more important than they used to be.